Duh. Subscribe to the channel. Yevgeny Vladimirovich, they came to you, said the security guard, entering the office to his boss. The man was dressed in a black business suit and reminded everyone of his classic bodyguard from American films. Yes, and who? Yevgeny Shumilin, a famous businessman and patron, was just looking through the reports of one of the charity funds controlled by him. The rich man quickly took off his paper and looked at the guard who was standing in front of his table. He immediately replied, giving Shumilin all the basic information about their unexpected guest. Speaking of vacancy, despite his age, he looks quite strong. Although he looks like a night owl, but he assures that the work he has declared for you is on his shoulders. He really wants to come to your reception. Yevgeny Vladimirovich thought for a second, and then a short smile flashed through his lips. You say he looks like a homeless person? Very interesting. Shumilin took a feather pen in his hand with a usual movement, and immediately made some marks in his diary. Well, invite him. Let's see what kind of candidate he is. The guard of the fortress bowed and, having put his hand on the earphone, quickly informed the owner's answer to his partner, who, while in the courtyard of a luxurious mansion, immediately reacted and let a tall, gray-haired man into the house, whose gloomy gaze was able to make anyone tremble. Even the one who saw the sight was stunned by the traitor, who gradually bypassed the territory he believed in at the gate every half an hour. You are being escorted. Shortly, the guard threw the man in the grime, pointing his hand to the side of the woman dressed in a dress of 40 years. She, in turn, cruelly pressed the lips, painted with a dark-bordered lipstick. It was clear that she did not like the guest at once. However, she only uttered a few disdainful tones. Please follow me. Yevgeny Vladimirovich does not like it when he is forced to wait. The gray man was just, inside of which there was even a small park for walks, also owned by Shumilin. From the window of the office, Yevgeny Vladimirovich saw a wonderful view of the small river flowing past the lands of the rich. Especially on sunny days, the water surface reflected myriads of sparkling glimpses, which made it seem that not far from the businessman's house a magical, shining stream was hidden. Thank you, Elsa, said Skumurin when she brought the visitor to him. Tell me, how are things going with lunch? My wife asked me to remind you that this time there should be as many fresh vegetables as possible in the dishes. Of course, Yevgeny Vladimirovich, the economy has fallen. Inga Valentinovna has already called. I personally gave the cook all her wishes, including about mineral water. Yes, it is mandatory. The owner of the house nodded. Rodion needs to drink more enriched with liquid minerals. By the way, did you deliver the water from Kislovodsk? Everything is waiting in the kitchen, the woman confirmed, and only after that the businessman let her go. Well, come in, sit down. After switching attention to the guest, Eugene Vladimirovich said, Please introduce yourself. I am Maxim Steklov. The man answered in a low voice, and walked up to the chair offered to the rich man in a cheerful way. After that, he went down to him and put his hands on his knees. He looked at Shumilin almost as if at a standstill, as if scanning him with his dark gray eyes, which made the businessman himself unwilling to take his eyes away. The guard was right. This glass looked like it had lived on the street for more than a year. The old, torn jacket was stuffed in some places in a way, and not at once. The jeans looked decent, but there was a huge hole on the left knee, and it was definitely not part of their designer's idea. The skin on the hands and face of the guest was covered with deep, dark tan, so it was impossible to determine exactly how old he was. On the one hand, the man sitting in front of him was clearly not young. He would have been years old for sure. Foreplay to any year-old. Even through the t-shirt in dark green, relief muscles of his chest came through. The same the rich man could say, looking at his legs. Strong, without a hint of. Could look much better than the millionaire's means and capabilities. So you came for work? Looking at the gloomy searcher, Shumilin said. At the same time, the rich man noted that his candidate had clean and neat nails in all aspects of his life on the street. Well, that's not bad, thought Yevgeny Vladimirovich. No one has ever canceled the hygiene. Yes, I saw your ad in the free newspaper that. They said you needed a strong and reliable assistant for your sick son. So I came. I agree to work for you in Vattery. Your son is blind. Is that right? Yevgeny Vladimirovich looked at the guest with surprise, and then his lips made an ironic smile. Maxim, I don't know how you are doing with your father, but you are sure you will be fine. You can just say Maxim, that his candidate was suddenly killed. Or you can call me by my last name, Steklov, that is, everyone calls me that. Shocked by such simplicity, bordering on tactlessness, Shumelin continued, carefully picking up the words. Okay, Maxim, thank you for explaining this moment to me at once. The thing is, my son is not blind, the businessman continued. Radion had not survived the most severe poisoning for so long. Doctors barely saved him. Unfortunately, the toxin was seriously damaged in his lymphatic system, which caused the complication to be transferred directly to the joint of the leg of the guy. For reference, Shumerin raised his index finger. My son is no longer a child. He turned that year. So the son needs a calm and simple person to walk around with. The one who would help him with the street traffic and trips to the clinic, where Radion is now undergoing treatment. What kind of special staff will you hire for him in the hospital? In turn, I was surprised by Steklov. He must be suffering all the time. Poor thing. He said it mercilessly, with sincere, as it seemed to the businessman, with concern for the condition of his son. This was very much liked by Yevgeny Vladimirovich. This is the problem. The son himself doesn't want the doctors to look after him. He says, I'm not disabled. Why do I need these seats and drips right in the house? Radion wants to feel independent. Only the physical limitations that he is now forced to observe are quite exhausting my son in the emotional sense. If we add people in white robes running around our house, I'm afraid they'll all die. And the last thing is incredibly important for us. Even his doctor says that the more positive emotions a guy has, the sooner he'll be able to say goodbye to the cart and the crutches forever. There was awkward silence between the men for a moment, and then the businessman calmly said, Think about it, Maxim. Will you be able to become a worthy companion for my son? It is very important to me that you here first of all calculate your own forces. Do not let Radion down. Steklov confidently nodded in response. I will be able, Yevgeny Vladimirovich. I will do everything that is required for your son to get up faster. You can count on me. Shumelin looked at his guest carefully for the last time, and then, shaking his shoulders, signed some kind of sign on his desk and said, Well, then let's look at you in action, Maxim. You start from tomorrow. You will live in my house directly. I think you don't mind? No, why not? The glass calmly clicked off. I'm just glad that I don't have to go outside the city. Shumelin gave him the contract. Great. Then sign here and here. He pointed to the marked blue checkbox of the field. From this moment on, you are officially an assistant to my son's companions. Great. Now, let's go meet with Radion. He has a day off today. He is in his room. When they were already approaching the room of the heir of the business empire Shumelin, he pointed to the next door, next to his son's room. You will live here, so that at any moment, if Radia needed something, you could not run here from the first floor, but calmly enter from the next room. I will tell the maid that she would have everything you need there. The man carefully knocked on the beautiful door, made of light wood. Radion, son, can I come to you? Radion Shumelin was a pleasant young man, who even while in bed, managed to conduct video calls with his father's partners and write down key ideas for his own business strategy for the next quarter. Steklov couldn't have thought that this full-life energy guy is now forced to move only with foreign help, or using a bed with a bedsheet. On the right side of the wide bed of the young Shumelin, there was an expensive and disabled wheelchair with a control panel. Now, the guy didn't use it often, but there was a time when without it, Radion couldn't even reach the small inside of the house elevator located at the end of the floor. That's it, Vasily Andreevich. I can't talk anymore, sorry. Let's call again after lunch. I will tell your father about the new investment portfolio, okay? Radion smiled at someone who was on his silver laptop monitor, then pressed the connection completion button and closed the computer lid. Radion, have you been working again? With a light emphasis in his voice, the father said. The doctor told you clearly, as little load as possible, and intellectual as well. Give your body the opportunity to recover. Yevgeny Vladimirovich walked to his son through the whole room and carefully took his laptop out of his hands. Dad, I'm begging you, Radion exclaimed. I die so bored if I stop taking part in our company's affairs. How can Vasily Andreevich choose the right action without me? He has absolutely no smell in analytics and long-term economic forecasts. However, the businessman was not satisfied and did not intend to leave his son any kind of work inventory. I don't know anything, son. You need to rest before lunch. Only at this moment, the rich man remembered that his new employee was standing in his son's room. Oh, Rodion, forgive me. I have already started to fall out of reality with this work. The businessman joked and patted his head against his head, and then asked Steklov to come closer. He calmly approached the bed of the young heir and stretched his hand. Maxim Steklov, your new companion and assistant, gray hair. Rodion was somewhat confused, but he answered the proposed shake and then looked at his father in a questionably way. Is that what I'm thinking, Dad? This man will be accompanying me to the clinic and to the rehabilitation. Steklov at that moment paid attention to the unnatural pale face of the guy. Apparently, Shumalin was right when he said that the doctors had to make a lot of effort to get his son out of that world. That's right. Maxim will help you when needed. I ordered him to prepare a room next to yours. Shumalin stuttered for a moment, and then, looking at the clock, he quickly spoke. Well, I think you can leave the two of you alone so that you can get to know each other normally. If anything, I'm in my office. I still need to check a few more reports, and there's still time left. See you out in the canteen. Of course, Father, Rodion said. Don't worry, I think we can find a common language with Maxim. When they were left with the glass, the son of the rich man immediately put all the points above the eye. You don't think it's not forever. Doctor said that I will not be disabled. Only the toxins should be completely removed from the body and all the fluid. Then I can walk again as before. I did not doubt this. Calmly noticed Maxim and looked around the Rodion room. Oddly enough, the young businessman's bedroom didn't have a lot of fancy things or a huge wardrobe, hundreds of business suits, and a showcase with diamond-colored curtains. If the young man's assistant didn't know who was sitting in front of him, he would think that Shumalin is the youngest and most ordinary guy. The entire interior of the room was only separated by a rack with a stereo, a record player, a small cabinet with a vinyl disc collection, the most beautiful electric guitar hanging on a belt made of natural leather on a special metal device built right into the wall. You get carried away by music, the glass noticed, after which he carefully approached the guitar. The instrument was made just fine. Maxim himself knew about it. There's a little bit, Rodion simply answered. When I had more free time, I would play something all the time. I remember even composing some melodies. But after my father got me involved in his business, I had nothing to do. The company returned to the guy. What about sports? There are different sports. Running. Do you respect them? And Rodion, instead of answering, showed his sore legs with a reddish smile. What's there? I would have to go to the toilet myself in the morning. What a run! Although I work out at the rehabilitation center on special training machines, it's still the same as learning to walk again. And I sometimes get on the treadmill under the supervision of a physiotherapist. However, I can only crawl like a turtle, but I think there is still a long way to go. Rodion and Maxim laughed together. Steklov liked that this noisy young man had such a light and calm character. He, to be honest, expected to see in front of him some kind of an annoying major suffering from depression and fighting in hysterical mischief. Rodion turned out to be quite different, and this gave the man hope that it would be easy to work with him. The son of a businessman told that he lived the most ordinary life since childhood. Only his family had much more money than his parents and other classmates. Father and mother spent their whole youth just to get up on their own. After all, Dad was not always such a famous businessman. He started with a very small company. They sold radio parts with friends. Then, when they broke up, he decided to go up to a higher level and began to develop design technologies, which he then offered to potential buyers, owners of large telecommunications networks. He was lucky. He was noticed, so he went. Rodion tried to lower his feet on the floor on his own, but then his face was more distorted by the thunder. Wait, don't hurry. Then Maxim came to his aid. Let's go down slowly, one by one. Like this. Try not to bend your knee too much under the right angle. It will be less painful. How do you know? You're a rheumatologist? The guy looked at him in surprise. "I'd rather survive the knee problem myself. So I understand well what you feel now, and I know how to handle your situation with my feet, to minimize the pain effect. You don't need to rely on pills, right?" The guy shook his head, braiding his hair, and breathed out with relief when his legs finally touched the ground. "Right." The hard breathing confirmed the rat ion. "I can't even look anymore. I can't find the ampoules and drips, to be honest," the guy admitted. "But the doctors say that I can't do without them." When the man and the young man went out into the corridor, Maxim helped the guy to keep his balance. Iridion confidently leaned on his crutches. The young man finished his family story. "My mother is a golden person. She worked as a social worker all her life. And now, when she has such an opportunity, she herself participates in the creation of funds, fundraising for sick people and those who are in a difficult life situation. We can say that she is a volunteer of the extra class." The guy smiled, and from the glass he noted about himself how much he obviously loved his mother. "It's a very rare phenomenon for the present-day young people. That's why I came to them quite late," the guy said. "He was already when I was born. But then everything was as usual. School, university. I studied in England, but my father wanted it so much. He said that there is the best education in the field of economics. Something without much joy you were talking about this very education." Noticed the glass, pressing the red button of the elevator. "So why should I be particularly happy here?" Radion shook his shoulders. "I understand that this education was necessary for me as heir. Father said that he would give me a company in management in less than years. It's easy to imagine how stupid I would be if I took the reins of the rule completely without a foot in what concerns my future work." The elevator door opened softly, and the man and the young man entered inside. At that moment, a text message came to the radio. Quickly looking at the name of the sender, the guy smiled and put the mobile phone deeper into the pocket of his jeans. "I look, and you have a girlfriend." Hiding his eyes in the corners, the cunning girl asked his companion, "I hope she's as smart as you are." "This is Lika," the boy replied briefly. "Don't tell your father about her, or he'll start screaming again." Maxim rewarded his guardian with a questionable look, but he resisted further interrogations. After all, it was no longer his business, and the fact that he was out of the competence of Steklov. He wasn't interested. A little later, after dinner, Maxim, however, understood the reason for such a reaction of the little one. Although he ate in the kitchen for the servant who was next to the master's table, he clearly heard the unpleasant voices coming from there, which were salted by Eugene Vladimirovich himself. "Radion's son, I was complaining about you again today," the businessman said. "She says you don't answer the phone when she calls you, and you immediately delete her message. What is this, huh?" "Father, we've already discussed this 1,000 times." His son replied coldly, "I didn't like Bella, and I'm not going to renew any relationship with her. I didn't want to marry her before this story, and now I won't change my decision to marry her. And in general, well, what can I talk about if I'm barely walking? Any old man can drive me away in 5 minutes." Yevgeny Vladimirovich looked at his stubborn look. "You're wrong, Radia. Oh, you're wrong. You should understand. Bella is not some girl from the street. You can't shake her off your sleeve like in that fairy tale. Bella Fidankina, daughter of our old friends and one of the most reliable business partners. Remember how Uncle Emmanuel used to ride his horse in his childhood? And how many gifts he gave you and Bella for your birthday? Those that were a hint, remember? Emmanuel Vaganovich is a very honest and far-sighted person. You didn't have for when we agreed to become family and to unite business. But this is a great party for you. What was your wife not to you, son?" She wait a second, Oxford finished. Oxford. Yevgeny Vladimirovich was very much shocked by the fork in the air with a piece of perfectly baked trout on it. Rod Ion was sad and set on the fish, and then he said sadly, "That's the thing, Dad, that you and Mom always decided for me. Who should I become when I grow up? Who should I be friends with? And now they are after my personal life. My dear, my dear, my dear, my dear, on the other hand, what's wrong with that if we've been looking for the most suitable girl for you for a long time? If you try to look at many things a little more globally, finally found the right word for mother, you would understand that we are the opposite of Dad. They always try to make you feel better about your mistakes." "Mistakes?" The boy smiled bitterly. I never had the opportunity to make these mistakes. You know that I really love my mom. Music. And the girl I want to marry loves her too. You say we should look at things globally, right? But if it were true, you would have understood long ago that I started studying economics only because I needed a situation with my father's company. If I really had a choice in life, I would have chosen to become a famous music producer or even write music myself. Oh, Radia, you break my heart, said Inga Valentinovna, and she was so impressed. But just look at it. Boy, what are you doing to your mother? Yevgeny Vladimirovich said strictly, and poured a glass of water to his beloved wife. And if you mean your Lika Arsniev, who also loves music, under a girl who also loves music, then you may not even continue. Don't hope that I will let you get married. Dad, why? The one who doesn't understand looked at him like a son. After all, you know how she treats me. We have a real feeling with Lika. She is ready to help me and support me always, regardless of whether I can go now or not. And this is your Bella. If you pray for her, never visited me in the hospital after the poisoning. She calls every time with one single goal, to find out if I went on my own feet. Apparently, they are afraid that she will be forced to marry an incomplete man. With these words, Rodion grabbed the crutch and, barely getting up from the table, slowly moved towards the elevator. Son, we haven't finished this conversation yet, warned his businessman. The young man turned to his relatives. Mom, Dad, I love you very much, really. But I don't intend to let you interfere in my life anymore, or drink from me what you want. I want to be myself, you know? Myself. Thanks for the lunch. It was very tasty. I'll take a break for a while. I'm a bit tired. And the guys slowly left the dining room. The glass in the kitchen was hard to breathe for the staff. Oh, don't pay attention. Savily, the local gardener said. They always argue about this. No TV is needed. You see, they have some Spanish passions there. Either we are ordinary people. Lika is a girl of the Radion, right? Maxim clarified. Well, yes. Putting a piece of corn cake in her mouth, he confirmed to Avelia. But I just don't know. They will get angry with her, or not. Arsenieva, she is not exactly our prince. Why is that? He rubbed his thick silver eyebrows with glass. She's from Basiakov, said the gardener. A very poor girl. Her father works as a janitor somewhere in the city. Her mother in a sewing workshop from dawn to dawn. How they end up with the ends, I can't even imagine. But they managed to cross with Rodion Evgenevich somewhere. I see. The thoughtful companion responded and put his plate in the sink. Have you finished the glass? Said a voice behind Maxim's back. The man turned around and saw Elza Koziva. The woman looked at the new worker in their house with contempt. She was holding a kind of a scroll in her hands. Yes, maybe you need some help? Asked Maxim. No, thank you, most humble one, said the woman, which was covered with clean clothes. It's for you, the economy said. Yevgeny Vladimirovich has punished you to dress in all fresh clothes. After all, you live in a civilized society now, not on a heat track. Be kind to change your clothes now. But if the owner himself asks, then it's different. The owner calmly answered her in the water. Would you like to cool down a little, dear? You walk around like a hot stove. Someone's going to burn themselves. You know, they talk about such hot ladies. Elza was so excited, then she was so angry. How dare you, Grubien? After that, she suddenly turned around on her heels and left the kitchen. The last thing Maxim heard before he went to his room was the quiet laugh of Sevilla. From that moment on, Elsa began to constantly look at the glass side. Not a day passed before a strange woman asked Rodion's assistant for some kind of favor, or pointed out his bad behavior. Maxim tried in such cases to either keep his dignity and keep silent, or to joke around without anger, but in a way that would put the unbearable economy in place. In the end, although he was a talkative man in his majority, he was not willing to endure the obvious mockery of himself. One day, passing by the office of his direct boss, Maxim heard how Koziv complained to Yevgeny Vladimirovich. Have mercy, Mr. Shumelin, but this is becoming simply impossible. You should have looked at this Steklov more carefully. He has eyes like a maniac or a last-minute cook. Of course, it's not my business, but if I were in the place of Inga Valentinovna or Rodion Evgenevich, I would not hasten to blindly believe this husband. After all, they say that a street dog is good only while it is fed. And since I don't like that I have to, I will beat the wrong owner to death. Elsa, calm down. Why are you so nervous? Calmly, the businessman said. Then he smiled slyly. Or maybe Savely was telling the truth yesterday. Can you imagine? He seriously believes that you are, to put it mildly, showing such an extraordinary way of sympathizing with my son's companion. The face of the economy instantly shook, as if the owner had just told her that she had eaten a cockroach. Yevgeny Vladimirovich, but you are a well-educated, highly cultured person. Why are you listening to the nonsense of some gardener? What's his business? To cut down plants and watch the flowers? I'll tell him everything separately. And if it's true, Yevgeny Vladimirovich, then you need to be careful with your head. Look, he has already disbanded half of the staff with his actions. Shumelin teacherly rolled his eyes to the ceiling. He has already begun to get tired of endless claims of his savings. Elsa Filipovna, I assure you, so far the only person in the house who has absolutely no relationship with Steklov is you. And I ask you, stop catching me in my legal break. If I ask you to bring me coffee, it does not mean that I am willing to discuss all the problems of my employees with you. But Yevgeny Vladimirovich tried to say something else to save money. However, the millionaire abruptly interrupted her. You are a woman, after all. But is it so difficult for you to find a man's approach? Yes, Steklov is a very specific person, not very sociable. But you should try. Elsa blushed with anger, but only spoke in a restrained manner. As you wish, Mr. Shumelin. I understand you. After that, she quickly left her master's office. The glass, which became a free witness of this conversation, barely managed to hide in the cleaning lady's room, so the economy didn't notice the reason. Meanwhile, Maxim continued to support Rodion in everything. He went to the hospitals with him, helped with trainings in the rehabilitation center, and in general behaved with him as a kind senior comrade. A wise and thoughtful man became a young man almost as a friend, despite the fact that he was suitable for his father by age. Sometimes Rodion himself was surprised at how strong and durable he was for his already quite mature years. However, the companion only smiled in response to this. He said, "That's why I don't tell anyone about my fatherhood. I don't want to be considered an old man. I feel young myself, and you can always train your body, regardless of age." Steklov almost never told anything about his past life. Everything that was known to his guardian, that Maxim lived on the street for a very long time. And the man had to survive in the literal sense. The latter often expressed his habit of gathering and storing food in his room. Gift from Zenaida, a young maid whose passion for purity and order was unwillingly thinking about the presence of certain psychological problems in her. In this case, the poverty simply did not understand. How could I explain her unremitting energy in everything that concerned cleaning, washing, and removing all furniture from all dust particles? Maxim, you are doing it again. The girl threatened him with a fluffy broom. How many times have I told you that fruits and cookies should not be taken outside the kitchen? There are a lot of crumbs everywhere. And who hides bread under a pillow? What are you doing in the confinement? If you want to have a snack, our common refrigerator is always open. In reasonable limits, of course. The glass was already on the words of the cute maid, and he didn't get offended at all. He just shook his shoulders and answered briefly, "I'm sorry, my sweetheart. I have such a wandering nature. I'm always ready to push everything and more into my pockets. I didn't mean to." "I understand." Zenaida kindly waved her hand and threw the remains of the garbage into a small bucket. "But please try to simplify your nature somehow, okay? Or I need to clean 2 more floors, and I would like to be free until evening today." Maxim assured her that he would try not to hide crackers and cookies in his room anymore. Then he went to Rodion's room to see how things were going on there and just talk. They now talked a lot. Maxim appreciated the ability of a young man not to talk too much among friends and relatives, and because at some point he could trust him and tell a little more about his past life. "You are, in fact, my last chance," said the wind Radian, somehow in the gap between the openness and the glass. "I had never thought that I would ever be able to live in human conditions before I met you. What, everything was so bad?" Seriously looking at the companion, the guy asked. "Yes, The glass stretched and shrugged, as if shielding himself from the world around him. "Once upon a time, I was normal too," said the Pavadari. "I thought I would have a family, children." The man sighed heavily, and then everything went down in a moment. My wife's ticker broke down at the production. From this, we can say everything started. I rubbed my hands nervously against the glass, as if it suddenly became very cold. I started drinking. A lot. I was drinking until I didn't remember how the city was at the other end, and there was no point in going back home. Anyway, the apartment was empty and lonely, without a check mark. At that moment, black realtors came up to me and said, "Wouldn't it be better to own a house in the wild?" But I behaved somehow. Now I understand that they had sold me something back then. Otherwise, I would have never signed those fucking papers. After that, you ended up on the street? Asked his sympathizer, Rod Ion. Well, yes, Steklov answered. So I started to drink to wander. They paid more, and you could do something useful all night long without drinking. And you asked me everything. Where did I get such a figure? The man smiled. But carry bags of coal and cement. You will not be so much of a Schwarzenegger. And I just tried to survive, and I could not die of hunger. The guy with sincere participation clapped his companion on the hand. Radion was a deeply sensitive person since childhood. This trait was passed on to him from his mother. Now, being the owner of a nice and sensitive nature, the guy seemed to want to take all the bad things that happened to his wonderful assistant. Maxim, you know, I never judged you, and I will not judge. We all have our own backpack with secrets behind our backs. It is very difficult for me to realize now what is happening in our lives. You know how many times I put myself in the shoes of those unfortunate children whose parents are forced to collect money for their treatment. My father sponsors several charity foundations, and when I was little, he took me there many times. I saw everything, their eyes, and the eyes of their loved ones, full of despair and hopelessness and hope. Hoping that it could all end, they just had to collect the necessary amount. The same happened to my mother. She took me to the orphanage, and I saw how jealous they looked at everyone who was more lucky than them. Thank you for understanding, he bowed to the glass. Maybe that's why you grew up such a normal guy, that despite his wealth, he saw the other side, the wrong side of society and human life as a whole. Rodion shook his head in a negative way. You didn't understand, Max. When I saw all these people, I asked myself only one question. What was it? A few seconds later, he asked the water. You won't believe it. A young man's face is covered in sadness. I asked myself, why am I so lucky in this life? And they are not. What is the reason? Why can I have everything I need for a good and comfortable life? And they don't even have the opportunity to spend the next night under the roof. I looked at the guy with the glass and the heat. Don't torture yourself. No one knows the answers to these questions. You will only bite yourself with these thoughts from the inside, and no one will be able to get rid of them. Happiness is already in the fact that you realize that behind the gates of your palace there is a completely different life. Your mother and father hold you too tight in their fists, but they are good. Good because they are so. They help each other not with words, but with deeds. Believe me, Rodion, it's already expensive. Due to the impulsive impulse, the young businessman's son hugged his companion tightly. At that moment, the boy thought that he had met a real family soul. A single-minded person who perfectly understands what passion and all kinds of philosophical thoughts. 3 weeks later, Steklov stood in front of Yevgeny Vladimirovich in his office and proved to him the necessity to bring in a guard dog. Maxim, I am certainly ready to help you in everything that concerns my son's health. But, kindly, why do we need a dog? The businessman sincerely did not understand his worker. Dmitri and Nikolai are doing great with their duties. They did not go through special training at the military base for nothing. She's a base, of course. Maxim agreed. But there are only 2 of them in the whole area. And then you have a forest nearby. Who knows who can come from there? And the dog, again, can be trained so that she warns your guys in advance with her bark, which way to run to them. And in general, with such a house as yours, without a good dog, you just can't. I already have a good dog on my mind. A friend called from the vet recently. He suggested that I take it away. The elder was noisy and confused. He scratched his head with a ball pen. But if you think that we need it so much, then the rich man gave it away. But I warn you right away, you take the dog under your responsibility. If something goes wrong with him, you will be the first to be questioned. Don't worry about it, said his guide. I told Rod Ion about the dog from my side, and he was very happy. It will be good for him to work with the animal. He'll get better soon. He is a good boy. He started to move slowly even without the crutches. He was very careful, though, and within his own room. But I think it's getting better. Yevgeny Vladimirovich even crossed himself 3 times. Thank God. My prayers were heard. I must say no, until she left again. Thank you, Maxim, for taking care of my son. If it wasn't for you, I don't even know if he could recover in such record-fast time. The next day, Steglov brought a new 4-legged tenant into the house and solemnly introduced him to all the residents of the Shumelnik estate. Rod Ion was really delighted with the dog. The German shepherd named Taylor immediately recognized her new owner in her little boy, on the same level as the noisy elder Max. The smart and cheerful dog happily barked, walking around the yard, and then ran up to the owners of the house, and with pleasure licked his hands or stood on his hind legs to poke Yevgeny Vladimirovich in the nose. Wow, a big animal, he said to the businessman, swinging under the weight of the dog. Maxim, how old is he? He's still young. He will serve for a long time with faith and truth. The only one who was not happy with the appearance of a dog in the house was Elsa. Well, another dirty monster was brought into the house, she said to the gardener, standing in front of the door in the storeroom. But this time it was still a mess. You shouldn't have done that to him, Elsa, said the whoreful Sevelius. A man tries, he wants to do the best. And Rod Ion Evgenievich, he began to feel much better. You'll see, this scoundrel will bring us more troubles. An annoying woman threw him, after which she hid in the depths of the storeroom. A week later, the whole family, all of them, was invited to celebrate the anniversary of Emanuel Viganovich. The same day, the bride-to-be was persuaded by his parents' arguments. As the celebration was about to last until the morning, the rich decided to give almost all the workers of their home a day off. The gardener and the maid went to visit their relatives and spend the day in the home atmosphere. Only Max and Taylor and Elsa and 2 guards were left in the noisy house. In the late evening, when there was no one in the house, something terrible happened. 3 robbers and murderers somehow penetrated the mansion's territory and slowly entered the house, using the basement floor, where there was an underground garage and an exit to the elevator leading straight to the hall. Maxim, who was resting in the garden, heard strange noises from the eastern side of the garden. Quietly calling the sheep, which was just sitting in its new hut at night, Steklov carefully watched the 3 of them. Judging by their clothes and movements, they were clearly professionals in this case. Dark clothes and masks covering faces made the bandits almost indistinguishable in the darkness of the autumn evening. They had knife bags sticking out behind their shoulders, and they had knives with perfectly sharpened blades in their hands. What's going on? I don't understand, Maxim the dog whispered. Where is Nikolai and Dmitri? Having dug through the wall, Steklov quickly found an answer to his question. Both guards were lying next to each other. They were unconscious. Having checked the men's pulse, Pavidiriu made sure that they were alive. Steklov silently followed the robbers. The smart dog silently walked next to him. Having climbed the elevator to the first floor, Maxim and Taylor happily greeted the robbers. Guys, good evening. Why are you working here without light? You can't carry the most important thing either. All 3 slowly turned to him. So this is the same old clown? Get out of here, brothers. There's no point in leaving witnesses here. 2 powerful high men grabbed the belt of the knife and threw it at the leader and his dog. However, the glass was far from as simple as it seemed. Applying several confident pain grips to the scoundrels and giving them crushing blows with his foot in the jaw and in the groin, Maxim was able to knock out the weapon from their hands. Taylor clung to the 3rd bastard's leg, after which a bright light flashed in the room. Oh my God, what's going on here? Elsa, dressed in a night robe, screamed. However, Maxim managed to notice how the unprotected anger and disappointment flashed through the eyes of the economy. Get out of here, you lazy sheep, until we finish you off. yelled the leader, and then threw his knife right at Maxim, at the same time throwing the dog away. The white light of the lamp was unbearable, and only for a fraction of a second it blinded Steklov. But this, alas, turned out to be enough. Stuck in pain and a salty taste in the mouth, Maxim Steklov slowly sat on the floor. Eliza was... It turned out that the neighbors of the noise were indifferent, who, hearing the screams of the terrible barking dogs in the middle of the night, called the police, and at the same time an ambulance. The special forces who arrived together with the police instantly twisted all three of them, and the doctors, first of all, rushed to the glass man who was on the verge of death. He was quickly loaded on the stretcher like two guards. Nikolai and Dmitri became the victims of the strongest dose of sleepwalking, which could be fatal for men if they did not take appropriate measures to detox their body. What is going on here? I asked the man who came to his mansion, who was also in the same house, what was going on. The neighbors decided to call the owner of the estate. The man who found out that his house was attacked immediately left the house on the anniversary and arrived at the site of the dramatic events, leaving his wife and son at the holiday. The businessman wanted to personally figure out the causes of what happened. "What are you doing? Where are you taking him?" asked the rich man of two doctors who were just loading the car with a wounded glass ambulance. "He has a heavy knife wound. The bill is on the minute." One of the doctors pushed the businessman's hand. "We are not sure we can save him. Too much blood loss. Take him to the second city hospital." The doctor was stressed and murmured, "Don't worry about the rest. I have my people there. Do everything possible just to make this man survive. He risked his life trying to protect my property." The doctor just nodded briefly, and the doors of the ambulance clapped in front of the businessman's nose with a loud creaking sound. Yevgeny Vladimirovich quickly got the number of a familiar surgeon from the same clinic. Having agreed to do the surgery, the millionaire did not hesitate for a minute and got into his car and went after the ambulance. When the businessman arrived at the clinic, he first rushed to the skating rink, which was just taken to the operating room of the unfortunate. Her eyes, anger in them, only anger. Steklov lost consciousness, and a millionaire who didn't understand anything, with horror, saw a gray wig slip off his head. Under it were short, sharp, dark-haired hair. Yevgeny Shumilin approached him by some unknown young man, after which he declared his police ID. "Captain Kasatkin, Valery Pavlovich. I think we should talk about a lot." "Of course," Shumilin said, continuing to look at the glass ceiling with amazement. Kasatkin took him to a free room, where he was put on an empty bed. "Calm down, Yevgeny Vladimirovich. Maxim is our employee." "You don't believe your own ears, businessman. You want to say that my son's companion is a policeman? What nonsense is this?" "This is not nonsense," the captain calmly answered. "Maxim Viktorovich has been working undercover for a long time. This is his professional trick if you want." Kasatkin smiled with pride. He was the only one who did not visit during his service. And to the homeless and to the workers of the theater sphere, even the killer was once depicted. But in your case, he had to get into the estate, having a realistic legend in stock. "But why?" Shumilin wondered, "for the sake of you and your son." Maxim Viktorovich was supposed to work out a gang of robbers who have been committing such bold attacks on the houses of the people. Your guards have given them a strong sleeper. As for Rodion, do you remember what circumstances he was poisoned with? The businessman in the details remembered the details of that bad day. But of course, it was very hot, and Yul was still in the yard. It seems like he got some kind of low-quality juice. Then Elsa immediately threw out the whole package, so that no one would be hurt anymore. But then we were wildly scared. The doctors tried to shake off my son for several hours. Kasatkin was very upset. She had already poured the juice to all the family members, didn't she? What are you hinting at? The rich man didn't immediately understand, but later he got to him. Do you think Elsa could have known that the juice was poisoned? And not just know, but she herself poured poison into it, said the policeman, as he cut off. Elsa Kozeva is a professional guide who was in that very gang. In the past, the nurse was able to make deadly cocktails from various kinds of medicinal drugs. So then it is almost impossible to prove that the person died or suffered from unnatural causes. Your mother brought poisoned tea to the guys. She gave such a dose that they almost gave up their souls. A little more, and they would not have been saved. That is my savings. What, it turns out to be a killer? I'm afraid so, said the captain. We've had several similar cases, but everything ended up much more sad. No one of the family members survived, and your son, apparently, drank very little, and the doctors invested in his complete salvation. So, Rod Ion, you could say, was born in a shirt. You are incredibly lucky that this time Maxim Viktorovic was in the house with you. We were all at the anniversary, Shumelin replied to the Grum. On the contrary, I blame myself for not solving this Elza in time. But she complained to me all the time about Steklov, as she felt that his appearance in the house could disrupt her cunning plans. I will say right away that she prepared a special revenge for the helpless and stubborn Pavadar. Not for nothing did the economy poison her with her knife cutters. Kazieva gave her subordinates the access codes to the gates leading to the underground parking lot, and from there they got into the house themselves. But when the fight started, the economy just needed to play a comedy in front of the surveillance cameras to create an iron alibi. But everything went wrong. Don't kill yourself like that. The policeman slapped him on the shoulder. After all, remember, everything could have ended much worse. At that moment, the man was noticed as if the wards were behind the doors where they were sitting. The doctors hurriedly ran in, doing both entering and exiting the emergency room. There, at that time, they were just fighting for the life of Maxim, the best surgeon in the city. Nothing will come out if we don't make him shed blood. A few days later, the surgeon, who operated on the police officers, said, only the group and the phenotype are very rare. The fourth group is a negative rhesus. Where can we find such a thing? Then the millionaire's face lightened up. You'll find a doctor. I have the same blood group and a rhesus factor. The surgeon was surprised and turned to the businessman. Are you sure? Doubtful. Looking at the miller, the doctor asked again. Absolutely, he nodded. Let's do it as quickly as possible. I want the man who saved my family to survive. During the transfer, the surgeon secretly made a comparison DNA test of their blood from both men. It is too rare that such amazing coincidences were found in his medical career. When everything was ready, the surgeon could not believe his eyes. Oh my God, but this is impossible. This is indeed the unspeakable way of God. When the glass got much better, the doctor came to Shumelin and showed him the results of the examination. The probability of the cancer is %. The businessman spoke with one mouth, and then returned to the doctor. No, he shook his head. If science says that you are related to Colonel Steklov, then so it is. Yevgeny Vladimirovich silently pressed the test. Tears flowed down his cheeks. Having brought to the ward his son, who had come to his police station, the man gathered with his spirit before showing the papers to Steklov and Rod Ion. But how is this possible? I, as far as I remember, was the only child in the family. Although, the face of a policeman became pale. Oh my God! And then the businessman Shumelin began his story. I always knew that I was not my own son to my parents. They took me from the shelter, very small, immediately after my mother died after giving birth. However, in the family where my biological mother lived, there was another boy, my older brother. It's you, Maxim. The millionaire looked at the policeman. The chest of a man whose doctors with such difficulty pulled out a huge knife was now tightly bandaged. Of course, my parents didn't tell me anything until the last moment, continued Shumelin. Only much later, having become quite an adult, I learned that I had an older brother somewhere, Maxim. Maxim was 1 year older than me. His Aunt Aglaya raised him. My mother's sister. Yevgeny Vladimirovich looked at his son first, and then at Maxim. Why didn't you look for him? Asked Rod Ion, talking to his father. It's not that simple here either, answered the young man Maxim. Now that Jinya told me about it, I'm starting to understand something. Aunt Aglaya raised me, that's true, but she never told me that I had a brother. I went to the police school right after the army. That's how I started serving in the police. And Aglaya told me just before her death that she was forced to remain silent about the second boy. It seemed like it was the only condition for those rich parents to adopt my younger brother. Otherwise, she would have to accept that Yevgeny would be brought up in the shelter. Of course, she didn't want to have such a fate for him, so she agreed. And she couldn't have been together then. We always lived very poor. So I really understand that Aglaya wanted to do the best for Genya. It was hard for Steklov to breathe. When I found out about Yevgeny, I was already over. But who and how would I start looking for? Moreover, at that moment I already knew about adoption. That's how fate spread us and my brother. And here's the gang. I wanted to do this thing last in my career. I'm tired of chasing villains. What can you say? Now it seems my dream will come true, but not quite as I would like. Steklov told that the accomplices, using their pseudo-economics of Elza, cleared several respected families in this way. Every time the handwriting was the same. Either they robbed when there was no one in the house, and then everything went quickly, quietly, and without victims. Or if the family could not be lured out, Koziva made the mass poisoning unhappy. The last thing that should have happened was with the Shumalins. But Rodion willingly took the whole blow, and at the same time scared the economy for a while. Nevertheless, the prey was too fat to leave it like this. And then Elza had a new plan, which was to be torn down by Maxim Viktorovich and P.S. Taylor. Now all the robbers are waiting for a good time, and most of all, of course, Koziva got it. After all, she deprived more than people of life with her own hands. When Steklov finally recovered and left the hospital, he was greeted by a new family. Brother, millionaire Yevgeny, and nephew Rodion, with whom he had already managed to compare with at that time, although he did it in the image of a wanderer in the water. Maxim Viktorovich hugged both of his loved ones and said happily, "You won't believe how grateful I am to God for the fact that he sent me to your house. Max, my dear, we are so happy." Shumalin replied, "You saved our lives with Rodka and Inga. Where would we be now if not for you?" The men hugged each other again, and the embrace of this was permeated with the incredible power of family love and sincere human happiness. Maxim Viktorovich resigned from the authorities. He was sent to a large honor to resign, and, although he was wounded, the farewell party was held in such a way that the local police station will remember it for a long time. Now Steklov lives with his brother and nephew, and of course, P.S.O. Taylor, who is very attached to the retired lieutenant colonel. Maxim is not tired of training him. The man is absolutely sure that he will be able to return to his normal life soon. Rodion fully recovered after 6 months and was able to put his crutches in the warehouse, now as he hopes for forever. All this time, Lika visited him, the very girl from a poor family against whom the businessman and his wife were so decisively set up. However, it was worth seeing with what sincerity and self-giving this fragile and cute girl takes care of their son, how the ice crust of prejudice melted into their hearts without a trace. Yevgeny Vladimirovich personally blessed the couple and wished the future young wives never to lose fresh feelings and respect towards each other. And he and his wife saw how their son literally shines in the presence of Lika, and therefore did not want to destroy their tender. Such real happiness. Rodion and his fiancée got married just 3 months later. Now Lika is already waiting for her first child and hopes that he will unite all the best qualities of her beloved men in himself. The kindness and love of the spouse, the wisdom and long-sightedness of the father-in-law, and the incredible courage and strength of the spirit of his brother Maxim Viktorovich.